Hello. Hi, Lena. I'm going to bring you in just a minute. I'm going to post a little comment here. We'll pin it. And then add you. Make sure my camera is working. There we go. Hi, Lena.
Hi, Rachel. How are you doing?
Hanging in there. It looks like you still have a lot of light. It's morning time for me, but evening for you, but it looks like you have some nice light still there.
Yeah, it is beautiful right now. We just had a fantastic summer rain.
Oh,
Yeah, the sun is going down at like what, 9 p.m.
oh, that's so nice. I
It's,
know it's similar here actually these days in
yeah,
Colorado. It's very nice to be able to still have light into the evening, I have to say. Especially I have found over the last few months, while people have just been spending so much time at home, like to at least have the light. I've been thinking about parts of the world where they don't have that kind of light right now, or
yes,
would be yet another complicating factor.
yes.
So before I get too distracted talking about the light and seeing how beautiful your Berlin light is, for people who are joining in, this is our trying to adjust my camera a little bit. This is our little weekly Slow Look Live check-in, kind of slow down, focus, talking to different people about where they're at and how they're making it through this interesting and strange time. And so I am Rachel Ropeik, the learning director at the Aspen Art Museum in Colorado, and I'm joined by Lena Henke, who I'll ask you to talk a little bit about your work in a minute, Lena, but who is in Berlin. So it is morning for me and evening for her, and part of what we wanted to talk about was relocating to different places. So I do just want to say, if anybody does have questions or comments as we go along, feel free to type them into the feed down below, and I will be the person monitoring comments. So Lena, you don't have to worry about it. And we'll chat. So
Yeah,
I guess maybe just for a little bit of background, when we first started talking, you were based in your studio in New York City
exactly.
and then relocated to Berlin. So do you maybe want to explain kind of your thought process about why you wanted to relocate and how that went?
Yes. So I have been living in Berlin, in New York since 8 years now. And it was always my dream to be fully based over there. And then came COVID week 6, I think it was. I I started to think how this pandemic will develop, and I didn't see any way for me to stay in New York because it became harder and harder. I was quarantining alone in the Lower East Side, and most of my American friends left the city early, so only the Europeans, it felt like only the Europeans were left down there. And it was dire. It was painful. I mean, it was hard, and I was looking forward to the summer and to do some shows here and there. But then I decided it doesn't make sense for me, and I made a big cut, which was a very hard decision to leave New York, as so many other European friends, because it felt like New York doesn't want us anymore, I have to say. If you compare the city with the other big art city here in Berlin, in Germany, it is, yeah, I mean, it is such a big difference. There's, of course, you know the story. There's almost no support in New York. There's some fundings you can apply for. It is very, very complicated to apply for. So I just followed some smaller galleries going through that process, and I could see it's very, very complicated if you don't have the support of like an accountant or like an in-house lawyer. And no wonder that all the bigger blue chip galleries got more of that support. Yeah, but then on the smaller base, like from artist to artist, there's absolutely no help. And to see how in Berlin all my friends got 5,000 euros within 4 days is unbelievable. So that made me think of like, how will I continue, and also how can I continue with all my shows being pushed back. And then coincidentally, all my upcoming shows are in Europe, so it makes sense. It made more sense, but it was a very hard decision. So I moved here a week ago. I think today is my first day without a jet lag. It was the biggest jet lag I ever had.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, these are all topics we are just discussing here,
Yeah.
and
And so what have you noticed? I mean, you've been back in Berlin for only a week, but you've already, we've already kind of touched base about noticing some real differences in how the cities feel between New York and Berlin.
yes, I was shocked when I
Yeah,
arrived with my face shield. People laughed at me at the airport. Coming with a full hazard suit, it's almost back to normal, which is absolutely great. But for me, it was very shocking because I didn't know how to react and was almost scared coming close to people. I did a COVID test right away, which is luckily negative.
good.
And besides clubs, everything is open here.
Interesting. And
You
are there
have
any changes in rules about how things open, or, do you have to wear a mask in places or no?
you have to wear a mask if you go inside,
Okay.
like going to the supermarket. But then I heard even the cinemas are open. I'm very excited for that.
Yeah,
Um,
I miss the movies.
I miss the movies. Absolutely. Yes, me too. And so in the movies, you go in with your mask and then you're seated 6 or more feet apart from other people, and then you can take it off, which feels, I'm probably going to leave it on, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, it's fantastic also how Berlin helps the cultural sector so much. It's not only artists, it's also institutions. And then I just got an email where artists can propose a project or work they want to develop right now to get funding during COVID. So there is quite a lot.
Yeah, and that I almost it's like I'm holding on to you as a like a good message from the future. Like you've gone to a time zone where in a country and a city um, that I hope will become eventually more of that return to these parts of our lives that we're all missing. And I'm
Yeah,
glad you've been able to do it now.
I'm glad too, even if I didn't want in the beginning. Now I'm quite happy to be
Yeah.
here. But I have to say, I also feel like missing out, because of all the protests. There's a
Yeah.
lot to do and to help right now in the US. But then there's another aspect, maybe we can dive in
Yeah.
a little bit, which is, yeah, I think as an artist, you have to stay super flexible. And I think I learned that while studying at Stable School, that sometimes you need to make a big move, and it's good if you don't have a huge studio and a lot of assistants behind you at that moment, so you are able to do that. So I think it's important to also keep that in mind, and that was a good reminder. I think
Yeah.
that's
It's like not getting too settled in a routine that you can't also step back and say, this routine might not be the best for me right now and change it
absolutely
up.
from a money perspective to stay flexible. You can I produce works with large bronze foundries, but I also did a lot of shows preparing in my living room when I had no studio.
Right.
So keep that flexibility in mind.
Yeah. So
And
how
that
is, go ahead.
no, and that was also I was also thinking about, like, and that's the question everybody's asking, like, what's going to change, if there will be changes after this, and I hope there will be changes. But yeah, how could that look like for artists? But then also a question for you: how could that look like a institution going forward? Will that mean less shows, maybe longer shows? That was a question for
Yeah.
you.
And we're thinking about exactly that thing right now. I mean, I can only speak for the Aspen Art Museum, but also just in casual conversation with museum colleagues in other institutions, the way that museums work has had to change too. And, you know, I think not to get too depressing about it, but there have been a lot of layoffs and a lot of projects that have been either postponed or canceled. And, you know, how people do international loans is a totally different story right now. So I
Yes,
think, like for us, one thing we're looking at doing is, you know, we've extended the run of all of the shows because we were able to reopen at the beginning of July. So we
great.
have visitors coming into the museum now, you know, wearing masks and social distancing and, you know, a much lower capacity than we have the actual space for. And so far that has been nice. Like the galleries have not been super crowded, but
Yes.
it has been really nice to have people visiting the museum again. Um,
It's,
and
I
so
mean,
we, you know,
much.
we extended all of the shows that were open when we had to close. So they're all still here for people to see through various dates in the fall. And it has kind of changed the way we're looking at doing exhibitions again. Like right now, we're not gathering any groups in the museum. So, you know, from a programming point of view, and the education department is what I work with most closely, and we're not, you know, it's like we're doing things like this, you know, we've made all of our summer workshops online, you know, we're doing all of these things digitally, um, until we can start to figure out how to gather some groups in small numbers, or maybe we start outdoors, or, you know, we're going to have to figure out new ways of working too.
Yes, and I think that's super interesting. Like, how can you continue with a way smaller budget or
Yeah, it's things that we're all going to have to be figuring out.
yeah.
And I guess I'm sort of curious how you're thinking about proceeding with your work, because you said you have shows coming up in the fall. Have you made all the work for those shows already, or is there work that you still need to be making?
Some of the larger works are already done. Like one big opening will be an outdoor show at the Rockefeller Center this September in New York, which will I unfortunately miss because I can't get in. The US is not going to let me back in with my visa, although I'm applying for a green card right now.
Oh, Lena.
Yeah, so that work is already produced, and that is one of the shows which got postponed. I'm super excited to see that, and we were lucky enough to go to the Rockefeller Center when it was completely empty and locked off because of COVID, and we had cardboard reels, live models, and were able to place the works already. So I feel quite confident for that, and of course, showing there is very, very exciting for me. As I'm interested in the city and its planning and development a lot. And then I have a couple of group shows coming up, but one big solo show, which I'm very excited about in Portugal in the middle of September. And this is one of the shows which got pushed back, but also I was very happy to have more time to develop that show because, as your title said, how to work slower. And yeah, so I was very interested. So I started to read Carl Jung, and I was very interested in like my own childhood and my own consciousness and how to work with that within the arts. And in a kind of like meditative state, I had this idea or question that I want to go back in time and see myself when I was very, very young, 2 or 3 years old. How did it look? How was I? Things like that. So I talked to my mom. She told me a little bit how, you know, how I was as a child. But then pretty soon I started to develop a sculpture with looks like me as a 3-year-old. And so I'm going to show myself in that show. And let me see if I can show you
Oh, yeah.
if that works here.
And here actually I can turn off the comments for a moment so that people can see more clearly on the
Yeah,
bottom half of the screen.
yeah. So this is now backwards, but the show will be called Ice to Gas, like how ice is evaporating to gas.
Huh?
And
Oh.
old photo. So my idea was to also look into kind of like family history and family placement, to place a baby sculpture of myself between two objects. One is a utility pole, and
Uh-huh.
the other one is a drying hoist. So
Uh-huh.
you're looking into my, maybe I have to say that before we're going to go through here. Usually I don't like to show a work in progress. But I thought, okay, after COVID, everything will be different anyways. You can look into my work PDF a little bit. So this all will change, but these were my ideas. So yeah, it's a kind of like family placement, like the utility pole, could resemble one figure of the family, maybe the dad, and the mother could be the drying hoist. And then these were the first ideas. And then here you see a mock-up. It's actually the real sculpture in oil clay. I sculpted that the last months. It has my face. When was I 3 years old? And one arm has a horse hoof.
Uh-huh.
It's morphed, and then one leg morphs into the Chrysler building. This is the back side.
I feel like it's like we're starting to get into a psychoanalysis situation, but is there a particular, I mean, I'm going to guess that maybe the Chrysler building is this connection that you've had with New York. Do
Yes,
you,
the Chrysler building, I think it's one of the best of the old skyscrapers. It also has to do with that in my new studio, I can see it from my window. And I got particularly interested in it because of the female photographer, Margaret Burke-White. She was a photojournalist, and you probably know what I'm talking about. She took these beautiful black and white photos of the Art Deco eagles outside.
yeah.
So through that, and of course also through Matthew Barney, I kind of fall into that building. And I turned it upside down for this sculpture. So it becomes almost like a hook, like a pirate hook to
Yeah.
walk on, or to stumble on.
But I like that it's also it's supporting you. It's a leg, it's like part of
Yeah,
something that has been really foundational in
yeah.
helping develop these ideas in your career and
And yeah, this baby is making its first step. And funnily, this is not absolutely not planned. This is my godson. And I
it looks
carved it,
just the same.
carved it him where he was making his first step,
Yeah.
first freehand step into life. Yeah,
And
here's
can
some,
I
yeah,
ask, does the horse hoof also have some significance for you? Or were you trying to find another kind of way of hybridizing?
it's a symbol I like to continuously use in my practice. I'm a huge horse fan. But I also like to think about it as some kind of like fetish object. So I wanted to combine that. Here it's actually on the cover of my new book from last year, which is called My Fetish Years.
Uh-huh.
So there I was working very direct with this topic. So yeah, I tried it out, and right now I'm casting the whole sculpture. The material will be red Lower East Side bricks,
Okay.
almost crumbling, almost falling apart. Maybe to show the time, maybe to show the age
Well, and I
of
like that
this.
there's all of this symbolism, including the utility pole and the kind of drying rack. I think there is that mix of kind of the urban and the domestic, or there's something about kind of shared, a utility pole. You think of it as something that shares a resource to many people, but then also things that are so personal, just you as a child, or a domestic space that's just a home with a family in it, or
Absolutely. And when I finished this book, which is an overview of my last 10 years of practice, I kind of like became more aware that this is a way I would maybe like to continue dig deeper into. So for the book, for instance, within these 10 years, we had to make some categories. And I can quickly show you there's 4 categories, which, oh, it's backwards, right?
Okay. It
So
looks like a beautiful layout, though.
thank you. So on one hand, you have the topic intervene, which is all the architectural interventions. I like to do like blocking spaces, taking over the whole house, or maybe building a balcony from the outside, things like that. Then the second topic in my work is appropriate, where I very directly take shapes of something and cast it. So it has a lot to do also last I casted the studio back then. So I think that's why I'm also now thinking about the drying horse resembling maybe poultry in the end. And then the third topic in that book is called Desire. My hobby is sculpture gardens. I love to visit a lot of sculpture gardens made by one person only. That's the only rule. And then the last topic is self, all my biographical works. And yeah, there's not so much, but I'm digging deeper into that right now through that.
I'm I'm sort of, I'm interested too because I think one thing you're bringing up is that um, maybe partly because of COVID, I don't know, but I guess that's a question. It seems like this kind of biography and the self section, and reading Carl Jung and thinking about your childhood and parts of, hybridizing your own body.
Yes,
Um, it seems like you've kind of found like a new direction or a new source of inspiration in a time when I think a lot of the creative people that I've been talking to are lacking inspiration. And so it's also just really interesting and um, hearing about how it's maybe offered you some new inspiration or I don't know, maybe that's too simple a way of putting it, but
no, absolutely, you're right, absolutely. And then there's also the fact that now I'm planted back into Germany. You know
yeah.
how
And
that
like,
resemble into my work.
yeah. So do you feel as you're looking, I mean, you have some of these shows and they were planned or postponed and some of the work has been made and some of it is in the process, but do you feel like, I don't know, like not a new sense of invigoration in your work, but do you feel like this is kind of a new phase, having moved back to Berlin, having kind of focused on these European shows? I mean, not all European, but especially that, this solo show in Portugal that you said, and kind of going in some new directions. Like, does it feel like this is sort of a productive moment for you in your career or no? Because I know we talked about that idea of production a little bit too,
Yes,
and
yes. I mean, productive in a different way.
okay.
I'm almost not working right now.
Mhm.
I don't have a studio. Um, I'm reflecting a lot and I'm reading a lot and I'm talking a lot with people, which I sometimes forget when I work in the studio too much. So it's definitely a change, and I also want it to be a change.
Yeah. And I like that you kind of framed that as productive in a different way, because I think that's also something I've been thinking a lot about is how can we define productivity in different ways, given all of the other things that are changing around us. Um, so maybe productivity is not just making work, but it's also reading and thinking and
Oh,
talking to people.
yeah, and doing nothing. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Giving your brain and your heart and your energy some time to, I don't know, come up with some new ideas or just rest or refill
Yeah,
the cup, I guess.
really like understanding the situation, dire uh, situation, which is, especially in the US, which worries me a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I hope that your green card process continues to go forward, and I hope that you're able to come back to New York when and if you want to. But it is really interesting to think about some of the things you've said about just noticing those differences and how both how the different countries, the US and Germany, have been supporting people, but also, as you were saying, kind of that community of European artists and your friends who are in New York. And um, it sort of just brings up so many things. It doesn't seem fair to expect people to keep creating work the same way.
No, absolutely not. And I'm curious because I have been mostly inside to really to discover the art scene here and how
Mhm.
people have been working during those circumstances and how to go forward. Yes.
Let me turn the comments back on if anybody, I don't want to miss, I can scroll back and see. I don't think anybody asked us any questions, but if anybody does have comments or questions, I've turned the comments back on so you can ask them if you like. Um, I guess one other thing that I was sort of curious to ask you about is, do you have things that you're coming, we talked a little bit about kind of institutions going forward and artists going forward. And I know some of that is changing for everybody, obviously. And I don't know that any of us have an idea of what that will look like. But do you have any thoughts of like things that you would like to see in the future of how the art world kind of works? Because we've also just been talking in our lead up conversations to this about just these changes. Travel isn't going to be the same. Like we've been used to a kind of fairly fluid global travel for the international art world to keep working. And that if you had a show in Portugal, but you were based in New York, you would be able to go and install the show in Portugal or go to the opening or be there for a while. And that won't be the same now. Do you have thoughts about things that you'd like to see coming in the future?
I think regarding traveling, what I've been talking about with my friends so far is like everybody's happy not to, be able to go everywhere. Or I also realized doing a lot of online content, Skype presentations, things like that, that it is actually way easier. Why don't we keep on doing that, for certain things? Of course, on the other hand, you always get deeper and better conversation in person. But it is so hard we will see in a couple of years, I think 2 or 3 or 4 years, what will have changed. Right now, of course, that's the question everybody's asking. But one of the things I was hoping, besides shorter, maybe longer periods of exhibitions for artists and for institutional wise to see maybe, because sometimes you can see that a specific kind of artist gets shown a lot, and then it gets around and then becomes uninteresting after maybe 3 years. So that there might be some kind of that there are, it's hard to really pinpoint, but I mean, I still want to see more shows by women, definitely.
Oh,
Yeah, more variety, diversity, absolutely. I think that's what I'm wishing for.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like I agree. The comment about these turnarounds have been too fast. It's like I think there is something about the slowing down, longer exhibitions and
yes,
people not having to kind of rush on a plane everywhere immediately that I am also hopeful will lead to a bit more being reflective or exposing more people to a new artist if an exhibition can stay up for longer. I think especially with galleries, when the shows are so short, I mean, I remember when I lived in New York for a number of years and I could never manage to get to all of the gallery shows before they closed.
yeah.
So,
I think
uh,
another also that, and I'm especially curious about in New York, the rents are already dropping. If there could be more DIY spaces coming up. I used to create also, and I was thinking, why don't we go back to that? Everybody got so busy. Why don't we go back to that and create shows? And maybe these shows will only happen outside
and
for one only.
And I think there have been some really interesting, it's like some galleries that are doing online only exhibitions
Yeah,
in this time, right? Or people are doing events that happen on Instagram Live, and that is the art event, right? I think that's also been an interesting thing to see is, like you said, it's just people using the tools at their disposal in different ways.
Exactly. And I have to say, I've been enjoying most of the content online. Like in the beginning, everybody was like, "Oh, it's too much," and everybody has to do it. Of course, there is always a difference. Like the artist should do it without payments, and I don't agree on
Right.
that because it is work in the end. But there's so many great accounts or like programs right now, new ones, which I enjoy a lot. So
Yeah.
I hope that is going to go on.
Yeah. And I think, the again, comment about the money, as you also just brought up, right? It's still, I think that is going to be an interesting thing to see what happens because it is still work. And
Yes,
just because it happens on Instagram and you don't have to pay to have Instagram doesn't mean that it isn't work or it shouldn't be something um, that is considered a project that someone should be paid for, right? This
yes,
is
especially, yeah, yeah.
your thinking. And I do think there's something, it's been interesting seeing what's gone on, with, especially with some of the digital programs,
Mm.
bringing, like I watched a conversation um, just yesterday, actually, from one of the other organizations here nearby in Aspen, Anderson Ranch, and they're having kind of a whole series of conversations between Helen Molesworth, who's their curator in
Oh, no,
residence, and different artists who are all over the place, right? They don't have to be in the same place. And they're broadcast on Zoom and they're wonderful. And it's just kind of listening to conversations about people who have interesting thoughts and are working in the art world and talking about their careers. And it feels like there's an amount of access to that kind of content that's much more open now when it can be online. Obviously, not everyone has the same access to the internet. Um, and that is a concern. But I'm curious to see whether that stays and
hmm.
becomes more part of the norm of this kind of international art world. That there's some digital, so for example, like if you had an opening at a gallery in Portugal and in non-COVID times, maybe that just would have been the opening for the people who showed up at the gallery. But maybe going forward, it'll become more normal to have a little like live stream
Yes.
for part of that opening so that people will be able to watch. I don't know. I'm kind of curious to see if this digital component becomes more a part of what we do going forward.
Yes, yes, I'm curious to see that too. And it will be awkward, and I was never a big fan. I'm, very old school when it comes to that, but it makes absolutely sense. Yeah.
Well, and I think what you said before too about at the beginning, everybody was doing something online and everyone just felt like they had to do something on Instagram and I think given that this is still going on, at least I will speak for myself. I think even what we've learned doing these conversations, these Slow.Look.Live experiences, we've learned from doing them each week with different people, how to do them in a way that doesn't feel like it's just putting something out there online because we have to, where it
Yes.
feels like it can be a meaningful conversation or it can be a way to connect with someone in a different place that we can't get to or um, so I'm kind of hopeful a little bit that I'm sort of a perpetual optimist sometimes, but I'm hopeful that it will also lead to more quality content
Yes. Yeah.
instead
I
of
can.
just saying, oh, we have to live stream this because people think
No,
we have to live stream everything.
important, and I really have to say it again. It's being here. I realized that for the people who are here who didn't experience what we went through in New York, that for them it's almost impossible to imagine that because it
Yeah.
was so different, and that's what I'm seeing now. And I just want to put that word out, and I also again want to say it's really really hard for artists in New York right now.
Yeah. I feel like that is, it's like maybe that's kind of a place that makes a little bit of sense to end on, where it's kind of like we don't know what's coming next, but I do really appreciate kind of having been able, especially to be in conversation with you in these last weeks, months, you know, kind of going from New York to Berlin and kind of getting some of your reflections. And, you know, we're here in Aspen, and I haven't left Aspen since I got here, which was right before the pandemic. um, but I have felt like it's been a really nice connection, at least for me. I will just speak for me, but just to hear about your perspective going from one place to another, neither of which I am able to be in right now, and feeling like I've kind of been able to talk through some of your experiences with you. It does give me hope personally. It seems like it's been a really interesting period for you in your thoughts about your own work and
No,
how you
I
participating in the art world, and that makes me excited for what you're going to do next.
thank you. Now it's now of course it is very interesting and important and frightening at the same time. But I think one last thing I want to say is that the transparency is more important than ever right now. To be transparent and talk about these things, like how hard it is and how hard it is to have a studio or not. And I don't know, we can go on and dig deeper into that with prices of artworks, things like that. That's another conversation. But I'm hopeful that we can talk more transparently about this going forward.
I am right there with you. I think that's been one thing that I have found really encouraging with a lot of the online content that's been happening. And I think this conversation with you has been a really great example. Like, people are being more honest about parts of their work and their lives, um, which I think is kind of helpful. It's like it's helpful to see that it's difficult for lots of people in lots of different ways in different places.
Yes.
But to be honest about that and not to pretend that, you know, especially in the art world, I think there's this reputation of it being, oh, this international, glamorous, you know, everything is about jet setting across the world to some gallery opening in another country. And that's not the reality, or not the only reality.
Exactly. Yeah. 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 The artists also, they need to pay their bills and feed their children. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and have some kind of mental space as well as physical space to feel creative. And sometimes that doesn't come as easily, especially in the middle of a global pandemic.
Yes. Yeah.
So I really appreciate the transparency with you. It has been really lovely to connect, and I hope we're able to have more of these conversations going into the future too.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to see what comes of your upcoming shows and where your work goes next. But
Yes, I'm excited too.
hopefully we will eventually get to meet in person when we can travel again.
Yes, please. Yes.
That's
I'm looking forward to that.
yes. All right.
Soon.
Thank you, Lena. Bye.